Today we're discussing background radiation. Background radiation comes up in the science GCSE and they can ask you about it in the exams. It's really important that you understand what background radiation is, where it comes from, and what can affect the amount of background radiation there is in your life or in your area. We talk about radiation. Okay, now we all know, or we might know, that radiation is linked with a certain disease, and that's cancer. So the higher dose of radiation you might receive, the more likely you are to develop cancer. So it's really important that we understand what radiation is, how much we're having, etc., etc. Now, radiation in our lives is completely normal. There's radiation all around us at all points. It's just a fact of living on Earth. There's radiation all around us. Now, our atmosphere protects us from a lot of the radiation that comes from space. So that's really brilliant. Okay, our atmosphere is great at doing that. It takes away a lot of the radiation that will be very, very harmful to us. Our atmosphere is really important for that. However, there are other sources of radiation as well. The most common source of background radiation on the Earth is radon gas. I think it's about 51% of all of our background radiation comes from radon gas. Radon gas is just a gas that's released from rocks, completely natural, completely normal. That's about half of our background radiation. About 10% comes from cosmic rays, that's rays from space, again completely natural from the sun that comes in. If you've learned about the electromagnetic spectrum already, you'll know there's some radiation that's dangerous or ionizing to us. We're talking about gamma rays, X-rays, UV rays, and the atmosphere generally stops that, but 10% of it makes up our background radiation. About 14% comes from buildings and rocks, just normal rocks that come just are on our beaches, and buildings as well, which they're made of rocks. So you end up with 14% coming from buildings or rocks. Only about 1% from the nuclear industry. Okay, that might seem a little bit small to you, but only about 1% of our normal background radiation comes from the nuclear industry. About 12% is medical. So that's things that we use for medical purposes. So we might use it for to scan a body. Okay, we might use X-rays to do that, to check for bones. We might use it as a tracer inside the human body so that we can see blood flow and things like that as well. Lots of uses for radiation in medical, so that's about 12%, and about 12% is food. Okay, so food can be naturally radioactive, like things like bananas, quite a common example. It contains potassium, which is naturally radioactive, so that goes out into the background radiation as well. Now, generally we measure our radiation in sieverts. Now, sieverts has the unit SV. Okay, and really importantly is this, that we don't just measure in sieverts most of the time, but because we're talking about really small doses, we tend to talk about microsieverts. Okay, now you'll know that 1 sievert is 1,000 microsieverts. If you don't know that, go and have a look at some math skills and about conversions. Okay, so 1 sievert is 1,000 microsieverts. Really important point there. And the final thing we're going to discuss today is how where you live and what you do might affect the amount of background radiation you have. For example, if you live near a particularly rocky area that produces a lot of radon gas, you're going to have a higher annual dose of background radiation. Now, if you have this over a long period of time, this could build up and could lead to cancer, but it might not do. It just increases your risk of getting cancer. Also, your occupation. Astronauts will receive a much higher dose when they're in space because the atmosphere isn't there to help them out. Nuclear workers also might receive a higher dose. It's really important to note that people that work in the nuclear industry generally don't receive that much higher than anybody else. It's all very well protected with lots of lead and things like that, so they're not going to be that high, but they might be quite high. And other jobs as well might affect the amount of radiation in somebody's life. That's the background radiation. It's around us all the time. It's made up of all the things that we've talked about. Really important that you can name a few of those, give a few examples in the exam, and that you can understand that where you live and what you might do for an occupation might affect your background radiation. Thank you.